In phase.
That's way to the right, right? Yeah. Shit. What the hell? Why is that? It's fairly simple.
Everybody,
I mean,
everybody's
yeah,
gonna figure
some-
everybody's
It's
thinking
It's
how they do
slightly
it.
to the right.
In phase.
I can live with
License
that.
it.
F2 and tried using that with the TI-86 on the desktop. Oh, I hated it. Absolutely hated it. Sent the amp back immediately.
Server interface.
I think it was server.
Now, okay, now turn this way, now turn this way.
If you calibrates my ears, everybody's gonna be disappointed.
All right, so.
Yeah, the music here.
That's the problem. Like I had hoped, but we can with those. So, as you probably saw online, I have the system set up where sending a stereo signal from my laptop can even play a record if we want to. Pure stereo till it hits these. These are supposed to be able to change directivity. Anyone know what that is? Yeah, nobody knows what that is. Everybody knows
Down
what
front
that
to
is.
back.
It's just the width of the dispersion. A cone and dome speaker has a pretty wide dispersion. A horn has a pretty narrow dispersion. This is a planar and it's in a cardioid configuration. So it plays fairly narrow by itself. This is a 10 by 5 inch driver. So in mode 1, preset 1, this is the main driver. Those are the subs. This plays down to about 200, 250 hertz. The subs play below that. The subs are cardioid. Everybody knows what cardioid is, right? Cardioid bass. Raise your hands if you don't. If you never see, yeah. When I explain stuff to audiophiles, nobody has any idea what I'm talking about. But cardioid bass is a combination of dipole and monopole. So you know what dipole is? Like a maggot, right?
Yeah.
Well, a cardioid is like a combination of a monopole and a dipole. It radiates forward, but it doesn't radiate backwards. So there's a big null behind the speaker, and that's really helpful in most rooms. In most rooms, a cardioid is superior to either a dipole or a monopole. Why are they not more popular? I have no idea, and I don't care. But you will start to see them more recently. Key, Dutch and Dutch, all those types of companies. There's going to be more. There's a bunch more finally getting around to the fact that cardioids in real domestic spaces is far superior to a monopole. And there's a secondary benefit in that you can place them very close to the back. I mean, you can literally place a cardioid this far off the wall. If you read online forums where people are talking to each other and it's like a bubble, there's no science whatsoever getting inside, you'll say, hey, recommend me a speaker that can be placed close to the wall, and you'll have 100 answers, and not one single person can tell you why that is other than it sounds good to me. It sounds good to me. I did this, I did that, but a cardioid can do that because it doesn't radiate backwards. So the main problem when you put a speaker close to a back wall is the backwards radiation is going to reflect off. It's going to cause all kind of cancellations of the bass. It's going to mess up your image, blah, 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 blah. So most people pull their speakers well out from the wall. A cardioid, because it doesn't radiate backwards, negates almost all those problems. And there's more to it than that, but that's one of the benefits.
How do you achieve cardioid status? Is it the cabinet?
Several ways.
Or DSP also?
Several ways. You can take a monopole, a box, like what everybody up here has, and combine it with a dipole, and the sum of their radiation is a cardioid. The dipole is out of phase going backwards, in phase going forwards. The monopole is in phase going forward, backward, every which way. Well, the negative radiation from the dipole cancels the radiation from the monopole, so you can get a cardioid that way. The other way to do it is like what I did here, where there's vents all around the back of the speaker, and then there's damping inside. So it's kind of like a quasi-dipole where there's rear out-of-phase radiation coming off of the front drivers, right? But it's delayed by the damping. The damping delays the signal and puts it out of phase with the front, and you have cancellation in the back. So that's another way to do it. There's a couple other ways to do it, but that's basically the most popular two ways to do it. You could actually put another driver on the back. I remember, if you remember my black speakers that were like an obelisk shape, and I call them the obelisk, that actually has a driver on the rear that's playing out of phase and delayed to the front, and it's accomplishing much the same thing, but just, you know, an added driver. So anyway, so these are cardioid bass, cardioid mid-range, and then there's tweeters on both sides. This one in the first mode is basically just a super tweeter. It's just adding frequencies above 12 kilohertz and all that kind of stuff. Who here knows what a super tweeter is? Everybody, right? What does a super tweeter do?
It gives you frequencies, most of your frequencies are above the hearing range.
Wrong. That's what everybody thinks a super tweeter does. And that's the rumor, is that you get these tweeters that go to 40, 50 kilohertz, and audiophiles can hear the different horseshit.
Right.
You can't hear
I
above
say
20.
most, I
Right.
say all.
But I'm just saying, nobody here and nobody on those forums who say they can hear anything above 20 kilohertz. So what's the point of a super tweeter?
Does it add perception of the soundstage
No,
depth?
the width of the radiation of this driver is significantly wider than this driver above 10 kilohertz. So I use this as a quote unquote
Enhance
super.
the soundstage.
It sends 10 kilohertz and more to the sidewalls, and it gives it a more spacious type of sound. That is the point of having a super tweeter, because a super tweeter should have much wider dispersion than whatever's below it, the tweeter, the mid-range, whatever you're using the super tweeter as.
So do old audiophiles appreciate less of an effect of the super tweeter because we can't probably hear above 10, 11?
The difference that it's making has zero to do with the radiation above 20 kilohertz, or probably more like 15 with most guys. It's the width of the radiation that they're hearing. They're hearing the width of the radiation. It puts much more high frequency energy into the room, and that's what you can hear. Anybody can hear that. As long as you can hear above 10 kilohertz, you're gonna hear that difference. But you're not going to hear 25, 30, 50 kilohertz. I laugh my ass off when I see people talking about 100 kilohertz super tweeters. Like, that's, you know, that's TV, you know. And then anyway, so in the first mode, like I said, this is narrow. This is just a super tweeter, quote unquote. In the second mode, this becomes the mid-range, and now this goes down to 2 kilohertz instead of 10 kilohertz. This is now a regular old tweeter, and now the dispersion is significantly wider across the whole bandwidth. So mode 1, narrow, mode 2, wide front, and then the third mode is the rear driver kicks on, and now you have somewhat of like an omni dipole kind of type radiation where there's a lot of sound coming off of the back. And I have it going into some diffusers here to diffuse it, and it's internally delayed by the DSP. The DSP is delaying it by about 2,000 milliseconds, about 6 feet of delay. So if you notice, the diffuser's right here in front of it, but it doesn't matter. The sound coming off the back is delayed by about 6 feet or so, just to add some ambiance to the front. So typically, if you're listening to a solo singer or something simple, use it in mode 1, has a nice tight image. You've heard horns, you've heard coaxes, you've heard speakers that have a nice tight center image. That's because either the room is heavily treated or they're using a narrower dispersion type tweeter or speaker. When you widen the dispersion, you get a bigger soundstage, you get more spaciousness, you get all that stuff, but you don't get as tight an image. It becomes a slightly more diffuse. So the benefit and drawback of narrow and wide is debated unendingly on forums and stuff like that. People have horns, people have cone and dome, wide dispersion, narrow dispersion, and they argue about, or an omni, and they argue back and forth which one is best. Well, actually, all three are the best, or none of them are best. Take your pick with the type of music you're trying to play back. If you're trying to play back a solo singer, an MBL and an Omni is not going to sound as good as a pair of studio monitors or mini monitors meant to do just that. And vice versa. If you're trying to play a full-scale orchestra, absolutely no way a studio monitor, a two-way type monitor is gonna sound as good as an MBL, as an Omni.
So you're switching these modes depending on the music you're listening
Correct.
to?
That is correct.
And is that changing the roll-off of where the super tweeter and the mid-range tweeter meet?
Somebody smacked Scott, he's not paying attention. That's what I just told you. In mode one,
Right.
this is 10 kilohertz, it's narrow,
Right.
and this is just a super
I
tweeter.
got it.
In mode two, this is now crossed over 2 kilohertz, and this is 2 kilohertz and above. So now this has a much wider dispersion, all the way down to 2 kilohertz. So now it's a wide dispersion.
I got
for
that, but
image.
that's happening when you're changing the mode.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
okay,
yes.
okay,
So that's what the mode is doing,
So
is
it's a
changing.
remote, basically,
Right.
while you're listening, you can
Right.
Right.
switch it up.
Now, there's no law saying you can listen to classical music in the narrow mode if you want. You know, if you want something, it just doesn't have
I think
anything.
that's-
Or you could listen to a singer in here. You can listen to a singer in you know the Omni mode or whatever. However, the idea is to pick the type of music and the you know the type of radiation that would correspond better to reproduction of that kind of
Is
music.
anybody else doing anything like that commercially? What you're
The
doing?
only company that I know of that did something similar was Bang & Olufsen with the VOLab 90.
Oh, yeah, the one that was totally dead. Yeah.
It's got like 8,000 drivers on it and all that stuff, and it's using DSP to cancel.
Right, so like, what about like a receiver that's Jazz Club, Brick Wall, you know, all those stupid, you know, preset sound parameters that are in there?
Those all right, so that's a surround receiver.
Right.
Okay, it's stereo until you hit surround. All right, but it's a multi-channel receiver. If you have a multi-channel system, there's modes where you can play back all the speakers
Right.
in multi-channel with a multi-channel signal. There's also modes where you take a stereo signal and it's called upmixing. You create multiple channels from just the stereo, so you can play a CD, you can play a record and get multi-channel. However, every single one of them processes the front 2 channels. That's how they do it. To generate the back channels and the center channel, it processes the left and right. I don't do that. This thing is only processing the rear channels. When this thing is on and the rear channels are on, nothing has changed here except the radiation pattern that I'm doing with you.
You're
Right. So if this speaker didn't decide to just stop working, it was working fine, you know, for the last 5,000 years, and then now when I change the mode on it, it's not changing when I change the mode from the master. Don't ask me why. So the idea was to, in mode 1, narrow dispersion, those are off in the back, as you'd want if you want a tight image up front and all that kind of stuff. Mode 2 was going to be wider soundstage, still fairly tight image, and then the rear speakers would just barely be on, and then mode 3 with the near omni radiation up front, those are in full swing. Those come on, they're highly decorrelated and diffused by the processing in there and the processing back there, so that you don't hear discrete sounds. You don't hear, if you heard a guitar back there, it would sound really stupid. So what you hear is more like a ambiance, as if a guitar is playing up front, but you're hearing the echo like you're in a big space.
Right.
If it was working, but it's not working.
So what mode are you able to use?
Just one, just mode 1.
So because this is the main that controls that? I mean, is that how?
It's controlling everything.
That's
So
good.
when I press the remote and it switches this to mode 1 or mode 2 or mode 3, it switches that to mode 1, mode 2. It switches that to mode 1. They're all configured to switch.
So the
whatever mode
chain
it
is
was.
broken somewhere here to there.
I think this amplifier is broken. I think this amplifier, because it was working fine until this morning, and it was originally the master. And then the display stopped working, and I couldn't figure out why, so I swapped them, and I made that the master, this the slave, and now it's not changing. I can reprogram it, it plays all 3 presets, and then as soon as I change it over there and it gets a signal, something's messed up with the software or the firmware. So I'm not going to do that instead, we'll just play some music or whatever. When I swap this one in, I might be able to do something like that, but it depends on what time the gentleman comes.
So you said it's going to be in mode 1 the whole time?
Pretty much,
Or
yep.
Mode 1 is the super tweeter, right?
The super tweeter's on in every mode, but it is a super tweeter in mode 1.
That's right.
In mode 2, it's on, it's just that the crossover is now shifted from 10 kilohertz to 2 kilohertz.
Yeah, I got it,
So it's always on, it's just the crossover frequency switches.
yeah.
When you try to build a cardioid base without using DSP, and you're talking about a cancellation.
Randy! What's up, buddy? This is one of my coworkers.
AJ, question.
Randy, welcome aboard. All right, I'm gonna-
AJ,
Yes, sir.
When you're trying to produce
Yes.
cardioid base
Yes.
without using DSP,
Yes.
and you're expecting the front radiation or the back radiation to cancel out the front to
Yes.
get that null behind the speaker.
Yes. Can it be done?
Do
Yes.
you recommend, well, you just said you could put a speaker right up against the wall. Do you recommend a spacing of that speaker in order for that?
Well, I mean,
In order for that cancellation to take place?
yes, it can't touch the wall where the rear radiation is completely blocked.
But
But an inch or two?
that's all you need?
No, that's
Yeah.
what we need.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
AJ,
Yes.
in your model lineup, is this the latest? And what, does it have a name?
This isn't even a model, this is just something for demo purposes. I'm not selling anything like this.
Okay.
Is there a market for something like this in reality? Sophisticated?
I'm selling speakers as fast as I can make them.
Yeah, but I mean, with the same concept of the
Yes,
switching.
yes,
so you are-
yes. I
okay.
just shipped one 2 weeks ago. I'm shipping one to Italy this week. As fast as I can make them, people are buying them.
Okay.
Once you hear it, and once you have it at home, you can switch the mode. Why on earth would you want to go back to a speaker that a one-trick podium and end up changing wires and doing all that nonsense that doesn't do anything in reality? But in reality, these things literally are changing soundstage, and that's one of the biggest differences that you can have in the sound, and the sound commensurate to the type, you know what I mean?
That's ESS, you mean?
The ES, yeah.
Wow, it's really clean.
Yeah.
My work here is done.
It's a throwback. I mean, this is the same design from 1970, Oscar Heil.
They're still using these.
What's that?
They're still using this design.
Oh, yeah.
I don't, but where do you see it? I mean, you say.
No, Martin and Logan, I think Martin and Logan in their entry-level stuff is using a Heil tweeter.
It's just that's a knockoff. It's like a
Oh.
little tweeter that.
Yeah.
This is the
The real,
the
yeah.
Heil tweeter.
The actual, yeah.
What they're using is an ANC. They're using
Right,
an
yeah,
ANC,
yeah.
air motion
Right,
tweeter,
But it's not like